Hey everybody, so this is Circle of the Dark Mother, whether you're on live with us or watching this on YouTube. We meet the first Sunday of every month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then most of the time our stuff is then on a recording on YouTube, which you may be watching it from there at this point. Just wanted to mention that next month we should be doing a guided meditation, and I will put more information out there on our website and also Facebook and with the Witch Lab event, because that's how we schedule all of these. But for tonight, we're going to have Richard present, and Richard, of course, is part of Circle of the Dark Mother. We are a Gnostic Kabbalistic group that uses whatever means of magic works for us. And we're very eclectic with a lot of different paths. We're Circle of the Dark Mother because a lot of us do work with the Dark Mother in all her forms. But we're not exclusive. We do work with male entities as well. But with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Richard and let him take it from here.
Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Crow. I'm also known as Tata Mbeli. So today I want to talk about wands and wand construction. Why that's even important. Why do we even care? So I want to build toolboxes. I want to get us out of the armchairs. I want to get us practicing and doing things that are functional and practical. So that's a concern to me, and I just want to share some information with you. So I'm going to share a screen slide here with you. Give me just one moment.
You're muted, Richard.
We'll hit this. Oh, he has to allow you to share.
Okay. Can you allow me to share?
I can. Let me do that.
Okay.
I think security.
Technical issues.
Just a moment here, and we'll get it going.
Okay, I think I just allowed you to.
And then we're going to go here. Okay.
Double click. No, double click. Oh,
Yes. Yay.
Okay, so are you seeing this here?
Yes. You might want to make it a little bigger, but we can see it.
Excellent. Okay, let's talk about wands. So my experience with wands is the first guiding tool, the guiding force and directive force. So this is something that, is used and implemented to influence energies inside and outside of the body. So where do we go about getting these things? What makes a difference from it being just something that is just found on the ground, or it's a tool that connects us. So we find these things by creating a ritual. We create a dialogue. We create some form of understanding of these tools that we then use out in the world. So that's why we have the attachment. What does it do for us? It's that implement that we're actually using to draw the circle, to create the space. So what's the values? The values is that it's beneficial. So we're going to look at the values of the wand. What do we consider during the time of its construction? So we look at the days of the week, days of correspondences and the spheres on the tree of life, how that intertwines into our working. So we can look at zodiacal associations. We can look at elemental things that are associated with, like the Pleiadian order, which deal with the 7 primary planets that ends in Saturn. Everything beyond that is out of the scope and the realms of human concern. It becomes generational, or it becomes something that is not concerned with human agenda. If we look at it from a Solomonic approach. So again, I need to kind of rephrase So I approach things from a very strong spiritual model. I'm a Solomonic practitioner. And so I do everything postmodern as far as my application. Obviously, there's things we've had to adjust or modify to be used. But primarily, I try to stick with things according to the manuscripts or the workbooks that kind of give us a guiding direction. And then once firmly established through these working books, we're able to gear more in the spirit model where it becomes more conjure oriented. I'm also a palero and palamayombe. So I'm a tata and kisamalangu. So I work with the forces of nature and the elements of nature. So considering these things, that's kind of where I wanted to start, was in nature, which things that are interwoven into every part of us. We were connected to this through living. So, you know, we got to use plants, we got to use incense, we got to use these things. Why? Because they work. There's a chemistry, there is a science. So we create these opportunities, we like to call them the working opportunities and not entrapments. So we kind of look at these things. So we're going to go down here to the days of the week. And here is a connection to the different types of spirits and on the sphere and the tree of life. And for anyone that wants this as that's sent to them to where they can look over it or maybe use it for themselves or at least have an idea of kind of where I'm going. So if this covers the days of the week and where it sits on the sphere, most identifiable that we look at working from the wand, from the clavicle of Salomonis, it actually gives instructions to cut from a tree on a Wednesday when the moon is starting to wax. And it should be from a tree that never bore fruit. So it should be within the first year of its lifespan. And so it is cut with a single stroke. And then it is consecrated. It goes through a series of different steps. And what are those steps? The steps of initiation. So to me, this is a process to develop the correct relationships with spirit and spirits in order for us to develop in this circle, I would say strengthening gnosis or experiential process that we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and our connection to God and all those forces that reside thereafter. So when we look at that, there's several different things that can be offered. So let's see, here's the spheres of sensation that we see working with incense. So these are some of the things that can be offered. Primarily, I'm kind of looking at Wednesday, you know, benzoin, frankincense, and lavender. That's the mix that I've used, as well as several other different types of mixes, depending on what I'm going to be using the instrument for. So kind of thinking strategically how I'm actually applying this. And then you can see in these 7 spheres where this actually matters. So seeing all the 7 planets and how it interacts. So the length that varies based upon your tradition or your lineage line, and depending on what manuscript you're actually following. I've seen several manuscripts that suggest that they should be up to 6 feet long. I've seen them as long as the index finger. But the way that I personally like to practice is to get the measurement of the individual, you know, for yourself when making a cut, that it should be from the inside of the elbow to the index finger of the left or right hand, depending on your tradition. Some say you should not use left hand. Some say that it should be from a fruit-bearing tree. I've seen a lot of different correspondences. I have correspondences that I can send you. I also have a link to the Pleiadian order in the timeline that you can plug in for your geographical location, and it'll set up everything for you astrologically to where you can actually build your ritual. So where do you go about getting these things? Again, you know, here's the shop here at Witch Lab. This is a photo I found online, and there's several different photos that I found of different styles of wands. You know, some are made of bone, some are made from ebony, some are made from hazelwood, you know, rosewood. I've seen them made from anything and everything. I actually have a slide here. See if I can go back to this one here. The one on the left here was something that I actually found at a fair that someone did not even know what it was. And so I had purchased it and then reconsecrated it. When I cracked into it, it was completely full of crystals. It had citrine in it. It had amethyst inside of it and quartz crystal. You could literally turn the crystal up and it sounded like rain falling, like a rain stick. Let's see here. So yeah, you can use different types of metals that correspond to the wand. You can use anything and everything that corresponds to your personal identification to using the tool. Go back. Yeah. And see if I can go back to sharing. This here is one of the sigils that goes onto the wand or the staff that actually comes from, can you see this here?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is the sigil that gets added to the wand or the staff from the clavicle Solomonus. And there are specific prayers that correspond during the rite. On 1 second, see if I can go back to just sharing the video. Oh, can you still see me?
No, just the sigils.
Okay. 1 second. No. Okay. So in the consecration of instruction, it says that it should be made of elder wood or cane or rosewood of the wand or the hazelnut tree, being a virgin of 1 year's growth. Each should be cut from the tree with a single stroke on the day of Mercury during the sunrise. The character should be shown as written and engraved in the hour of Mercury, and thus being done. Adonai, most holy, designed to bless and consecrate this wand on the staff, that we may obtain necessity and virtue through the most holy Adonai, whose kingdom endureth unto the ages of ages. Amen. So this instruction is an opportunity or the ability for us to be able to connect. And you don't necessarily have to use these specific sigils if your tradition or you're feeling inclined to use like Theban, using your own name. There are other inscribed sigils that are actually put on the wand from the Lesser Key of Solomon. There's other instruction that I actually consecrated my wand with, which actually translates to cutting a green branch. And the purpose of this is that it's a newborn tool. And so it signifies that you made a sacrifice and offered a sacrifice. So that's where you tend to see these things in these practical workbooks. So there's a series of different steps that we can take, but this is just one of many. So I hope that this information is useful to you.
Absolutely. And so I thought interesting because, you know, I come from a slightly different tradition, but similar ideas, of course. I found it interesting on the idea of Wednesday because of it being associated with Tiferet, which to me makes me think of enlightenment and you know, the Christos or Messiah. So it's interesting that it's a Wednesday to construct the wand. Because, you know, if the goal is enlightenment, it would make sense that your wand would correspond. Plus with it being east, which is also the same energy.
Well, if we look at what that corresponds to, it is Raphael, you know,
Yes.
and we,
Yeah,
what's that?
Hermes.
Yeah, and Hermes.
Yes, it does. It deals with communication and movement and magic and written agreements and contracts, being able to transmit word and magic and transition time and space. And so that's why you would use this. If we look on the spheres, or even look at the dynamic of the relationships of what we're actually influencing, if we look at it from a thwarting perspective, we could consider the rulership over the king of the east, which would be Paimon. So looking at what those things that he actually does, and actually instructs, and what he actually carries out. And you actually look at the mythos of what Raphael biblically was used for, and what he's been used for over the centuries in different ways. It's carrying messages or deliverance out of a situation, compelling or influencing spiritual influences. So you will see a transition with Raphael and Mikael, and that was actually introduced by the Golden Dawn. So what's that?
No, okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll see that that plugs in, and you'll see different time periods. And you know, I try not to get into the conflict between air and fire, of where it transcends and where that should be. Obviously, you know, you're using metal, or you're using wood, so that would have its own place and its own correspondence.
I know the tradition I came from too can also use this crystal wands also, which I found all the above useful. You know, whether it's crystal or wood or metal, I've used all three types. And it's interesting, the different energies based on what you're using. But there definitely is a place for all of them, depending on you and your, you know, what you resonate with and what you're trying to do.
I would agree.
So the sigil that you're displaying, is that Enochian or is it a different?
So that specifically comes from the clavicle Solomonos,
Okay.
from the King Solomon. That is actually a grimoire that gives instruction of how to carry out ritual, build your implemental tools, and it actually gives you prayers and invocations to actually do. Can you see me at all?
Yes, but not full screen. We see the sharing, the screen share full screen.
How do I share this full screen? I'll actually show them the book. I always keep my grimoires not far from me when I need something.
You just hold it up to the camera.
Oh, okay. This is it right here. The Key of Solomon the King.
Okay. Yep.
This is Joseph Peterson's his translation.
Excellent. It's interesting because, you know, my understanding of sigils and such, some of it looks very Hebraic, you know, it looks like Hebrew, some of the sigils here, which I'm sure, you know, being Solomonic, it's going to have some Hebrew correspondences, I would think. But interesting. And, you know, I've seen other sigils that have similar properties, where, you know, it's an energetic code, basically, is what they're trying to show. So
It is. Most of them are positioned, or they're constructed with a life of its own or its own identity to its life force of what it actually represents, or it's an insignia that bears some kind of signature to the spiritual world, that you're becoming a mediator of that message. And so it becomes a life force in its own. And then you become a directive guide to what is done with that. So placing something underneath a seal, placing a seal over certain parts of the body, whether it's made out of paper, whether it's made out of certain types of animal skin or made out of specific types of metal. So those can be used in a lot of different ways that actually correspond to why you would even want to make a wand in the first place, because it's that directive guiding force. So it kind of sets the parameter outside of the circle or outside of the space, to create a barrier between your physical body and the physical world. Or sometimes it's represented as a manifestation of certain types of creation. So you see that in the sigils. So you'll see how they're drawn, or how they begin, or how they end, or what's actually inscribed. There are some sigils that do have Hebrew or Old Latin written into these symbols, because they actually mean something. They actually tell the character what to do. You know, when we're creating a dialogue for the spirit, we're creating a place and an opportunity for it to be able to receive and engage. And so it's just a building relationship. You know, I think it's a form of diplomacy that we're taking another step that guides us to another step.
Interesting. You know, and I know too that when we talk about Kabbalah, or we talk about some I don't know why I had trouble saying Solomon magic. I was trying to say Solomonic. I don't know. My brain's not speaking well. But you know, people think immediately of Judeo-Christian tradition, and obviously Kabbalah starts in a Judaic paradigm. But I also know a lot of this can be used in non-Judeo-Christian paradigms, with spirits that you wouldn't normally think of. You know, like you know, maybe working with other deities or spiritual forces, because it's about energy, right? It's not exactly, you know, the rote of you know, Judaic tradition or such. So I just think that's an interesting thing, that the sigils and the message on there is to work with spiritual forces, but we don't have to get stuck in our very dogmatic idea of what's what. I think, at least that's my view.
So it's transitional. I think it kind of fits into all the spiritual models when you truly look at it. It is psychological, it is energetic, it is spiritual. You know, it is all of those things. When we look at how much effort is put forward is usually the response that you get when developing these things. You know, you put little effort or little energy into it. Results may vary, you know.
Right.
If you look at how the grimoires were actually structured, actually it was forms of heretical Christianity.
Right.
I mean, these were books written by clerical underground. You know, these were written by priests that had understanding of how to influence, because they were exorcists. They were people that were conjure. You know, they were creating communion, or they were developing relationships with these specific influences to change outcomes. You know.
Interesting. Yeah, and absolutely, and thank you for the way you phrased that. That's really awesome. So with the ones, I know you mentioned should you make it, should you buy it, or should you get it gifted? I know what my theory is there. So what are your comments on that?
Obviously, going back to, you know, kind of my first response, results may vary. In my personal opinion, I think that going out into nature and making offerings to the forces and, you know, collecting it and going through these elaborate rituals. You're doing very specific things for a very specific reason, because it's a form of initiation or a communion between you and the forces of nature. So going and collecting it will ultimately, I think, would be the best experience to be had. But on the other side of the situation, there are people that live in the cities that, you know, them going out and cutting a branch in some neighbor's yard probably would not be received as necessarily a good magical act, you know. So purchasing them at metaphysical shops or being gifted, you know, something by a friend. On my slides, actually, I have a photo of me actually showing the length of a wand. Let's see if I can go back here and share this to you. Sure. And we're going to go here. Oh, can you see that again?
What was that?
No, we're seeing the sigil still.
Okay, I'm going to minimize this. And here we go. Here we go. This here was actually gifted to me from a friend, and it is hazelwood that he had placed several of the stones on here and the crystal, and went through this elaborate ritual to prepare this for me. And it has a crystal ball on the adjacent side, which at the bottom had a feather attached. And me and him shared this connection together when I met him. You know, me and him were friends from grade school, and he had developed this wand for me for us to use in magical circles together, and still have it as a gift and only use it for that time.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I do agree with you. I think if you have the ability and the means to make something, it's super powerful because you're dedicating it. That being said, I've not made any of mine, but I do believe then you put in the time of consecrating them and linking them to you and whatever your practice is. So if you don't make it, make sure you do put the time into bonding to it. Because if you don't do that, then it is just a stick, right? Or a piece of something. You gotta have that. Some of the most powerful ones I ever ones that were gifted. The other thing, of course, if you find something that like I have a porba that came from India, and that's, you know, it's old and it's crystal and it's amazing. And but again, I had to do ritual to re-energize it to me and my practice instead of, you know, however it was used in the past, because who knows, right? I would assume being a Purbet was probably Buddhist, but you don't know what people used it for. So
That's true. And to me, without the ceremony and the ritual and the connection to those spiritual forces, it's an empty piece and an empty vessel until it's properly consecrated. And I guess it's just from my perspective personally, because I tend to come at things very traditionally, but it is not the only way. It's one of many ways.
Right, right. I do know that my teacher at one point told me that, you know, our spiritual tools are extensions of our light body. They are, you know, a manifestation of our energetic body. And so however you do it, you need to make that link with it. And that can be through, you know, the practices you've used. It can be through Kabbalistic ceremony. It can be through a nature magic. It can be through, because again, we're non-dogmatic here. We don't use what you use to do what you do, but make sure you do link to these tools, because that's an important piece. You mentioned size too, and I know you gave your view on it, and I think that's interesting. I've heard the whole thing about the length of the forearm also. Some of mine are, some of mine aren't. But interestingly too, what's your take on staves? So like a staff that's, you know, maybe 5 foot tall. Do you see that as wand energy, or is that something different?
I come at it from a couple different perspectives. I think it's its own tool in itself. When we think about its construction and how it's cut and its preparational period, it's very similar. Okay. To me personally, I own one staff and should only own one staff for the rest of my life. And that comes from me following a specific path that is the tool that can be used for any and everything. Okay. And this comes specifically from the Great School of Wizardry. And, you know, my staff actually is in the photograph here. You can still see it. Here to the right, that's the staff that I actually consecrated with Oberon Zale Ravenheart. And I use for ceremonies. And that's part of the rites of passage in the Great School of Wizardry is at conclusion to your apprenticeship is that, you know, you receive a staff or you build a staff or you go on an adventure to find these things. And then you take that out in the world and you use that with your magic, you know?
Really?
So good.
I was just gonna say really interesting, because the tradition I came from, the staff is also used as you said, as like an all-purpose thing. It can replace any of the other tools in the tradition I came from. And I do have two, but the one is window dressing. I don't use it. There is only one that I actually use. You know, the other one's for decoration more than anything. But yeah, so that's interesting coming from totally different backgrounds, but the same idea.
But if you look at some of the manuscripts, actually, they're built exactly the same as far as the ritual outline. But as far as the usage, it's actually used to draw more space. You know, instead of this extension from your forearm, now you're able to mark the outline of your circle. You know, you have a rod that's, you know, 5-6 feet long. You can actually mark yourself in the sand. You can create the markings on the floor, you know, by using an attachment that has a piece of chalk, you know, where you can circumscribe yourself within the circle.
Well, and I know one of the things that the tradition I came from talked about was the fact that not that we're condoning violence or anything, but the staff in a way is like the knife from the standpoint it can do damage, where a wand, I guess you could, but and again, not that we're doing damage. It's just the idea that the staff has so many functions. It helps you walk. It helps you draw your circle. It helps you to, if you had to defend yourself, your staff could do that. It's usually wood, and where the wand wasn't always wood in the tradition I came from, and so it's got a connection to the earth, so it connects to the pentacle. So yeah, all these different associations. But I always find it interesting to hear how different traditions have different but similar ideas. I find that really fascinating.
Did anybody have any questions, any comments, anything that they wanted to share?
I guess my only other comment is I know the wand and the knife tend to be reversed in some traditions, where the wand in some is fire and the knife is air, and then in some traditions those are flipped.
Right.
And I don't think either way is wrong. I think it's however you energetically connect with it is fine. But I mentioned that because it is interesting that there is that transposition sometimes.
Yeah, your correspondence tables are differing based on different time periods and how they're actually being applied. Some would argue that the reason why it was transitioned was to hide the information from the open public, and then it became tradition. Some would also argue that it's just a different correspondence table, take it as you wish. You know, we now live in a time period where not everything is just set in stone one way. There's different ways to make a cake, you know?
Right.
So when we start looking at it from that idea, there's a lot of different angles to approach this. and just do what your tradition teaches you.
Yeah.
You know, do what connects with you, what you feel that you're drawn to do. You know, follow that lineage, and learn from your elders, learn from your teachers, and take that out into the world and manifest that reality, and do something with it out in the world. And that's kind of the premise here. You know, I debated on doing like a full elaborate ritual showing you how it's done from X, Y to Z, but that would be extremely extensive, which I'm more than willing to do. But it would be a series of steps to make sure that everyone present could do something with it. I just wanted to give a generalization of how you can approach these things and how you use them and that kind of thing.
One more question from me, and I don't mean to be hogging this, but
Go
the tradition I came from, we actually could use any of our tools to open our circle. So usually it was the wand, but we could use our porba, our knife. We could even use our cup or our pentacle, based on the energy we were trying to produce. For the traditions you've been involved in, is it exclusively opening with the wand, or have you had that idea of opening with different tools?
I would say based upon the group that I've worked with, because first I have to approach this that I've been involved with a lot of different types of groups of people,
Right.
with lots of different approaches to spirituality, and some even entirely different religious practices, being a priest and multiple traditions and being experienced in these things, not just viewing or thinking or necessarily just being academic, but actually stepping into the circles, doing them. It's essential in some traditions to open with a wand in comparison to using a knife. A knife would have more of a tension binding influence, or you were trying to specifically influence something that was not necessarily receptive, where a wand could yet in fact still have negative implications as well as positive, and even like the cutting of space, drawing a cone of power, or using the wand as more subtle, and depending on what it's actually made out of, what materials are you using, what is the full set of the chemistry that's being applied, what are you actually doing, and the ceremony. I think that kind of holds presidency of like what you're trying to actually execute, and the ritual, because if I'm trying to do something that might be not so friendly, comparison to something that would be more calm and subtle, that would really determine how I use my tools.
Thank you, and that's pretty much how I see it too. But really well said. I typically use the wand. The time I use the knife or the porba is usually when it's a banishing or a dark force trying to be cut off from someone, or binding, cutting like family ties. I have never actually used the cup or the pentacle for my opening. In the tradition I came from, you could, but again, they're very specific. It would be a very specific situation when you do that. The crystal ball could be used too in the tradition I came from, and that would be a middle pillar kind of energy. But we used, in the tradition I came from, the wand was merciful. And so we used it because we wanted to as much energy as possible usually. Again, if it was something where you were trying to banish or cut, then the knife. But really well said, the way you said, it's all about what are you trying to do. And I have multiple altars with multiple wands and knives, and I will use a different wand or a different knife depending on what I'm doing, based on the direction of the altar, based on the composition of the tool. It can get sort of complicated. It doesn't have to be. It can be very easy. But in some cases, I will use something different because of a very specific need. But really well said the way you explained it, Richard.
you know, when you look at all the other tools, especially from our group, how they're actually structured in the curriculum, and how they're actually applied, and people coming from, you know, a diverse application, you know, how they're applying these things. When I think of like the pinnacle was born from a ring, or was used as like a layman on the body to actually protect the energy of the individual, to separate the physical body and the spiritual influences that are guarding or sealing around the outside of the body. So using a layman, which would be something that would cover almost like a shawl to the body, like covering underneath the robe to guard the heart of the practitioner, that kind of thing, or wearing a ring of protection, you know, and the pinnacle being a directive force given by the angels to humanity to guard against, you know, malefic energies. You know, when we think of it in more of again, a thwarting position, you know, using it to guard and protect, to draw the space. But the crystal ball is used primarily for divinatory purposes, or to trap something, or to seal something inside. So it's a vessel. It's a vessel to look, project, and receive information.
In the Gnostic Kabbalah tradition I came from, each of the elements were the letters of Yeshua in Hebrew, Yod He Shin Vav He. And again, this is not from a Christian standpoint at all. This is based on the universes as well, the universes of Kabbalah. And so the crystal ball represented, in that tradition, compassion and spirit space. So as you said, you know, divination, obviously, because you're looking into spirit space, the idea that you're also, you know, it is three-dimensional versus, not that the other ones are two-dimensional, but they're either flat or like a cup can hold things, but a crystal ball is like a matrix. So I see where you're going with that too.
It creates a vortex, and I'm very cautious of using that word, because then we get into a whole bunch of other conversations. But you know, it creates a liminal space, to where you're creating a window or a door that you're giving and receiving information. Yeah. So as much as you give, it also receives, and vice versa.
Yep, which is why a middle pillar from a Kabbalistic standpoint, because it is both mercy and severity, giving and receiving. Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, interesting. I always love hearing other, you know, people's perspectives based on their experience and tradition, because I think you learn so much by challenging your beliefs, by listening to what other people have done and how they see it.
I think it's a deeper root to knowledge, seeking more than I understood yesterday, giving me the opportunity to explore this vast mystery of the world that we live in. So it creates an opportunity to understand a multitudes of truths, to where we can discover what's valuable to ourselves.
Absolutely. So Brandon, James, any questions or comments or anything? I'm not putting you on the spot.
Oh no, it was very good. Thank you, Richard.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Anything you want to say in closing before I stop the recording?
Sure. In the link here on the right hand side, you can reach me at my personal email. Let me see if I have. So I'm also found at Crow and Rue, crowandrue.com. That's the webpage that we've opened. I have linked. What's up? Yeah, I'll post it here in the chat. Hang on one second.
It's easier to copy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to get in touch with Richard, you can also go to our website, which is all over this stuff, or Facebook page, and I can get you that contact too. So if you're watching this on YouTube later, you can reach out to me to get information.
Hang on one second, please.
Yeah, and while he's doing that, again, next meeting, which may be off a little bit from the normal timing, but I'll post it on Witch Lab because I will be out of town briefly. But we will be doing a guided meditation. And then from there, we'll be doing who knows what, because we do different things every month. Oh, there we go. Definitely can see the website and your email. So that's awesome. Oh, and a link for correspondences. That's nice too.
So,
You could repeat what you just said.
oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So if anybody was wondering, the lineage line that I come from in Palo is Bejoka and Pinda and Gondo Mayombe. And I'm a Tata and Kisimalongo. I do spiritual services for people. So I am a priest working with the spiritual forces of nature and working with the spirits of the dead. So I do spiritual consultations, I do spiritual readings. I do offer spiritual services, not only from the website, but also do Solomonic work. I do petition work, and I do clientele work. If someone needs assistance, we can kind of discuss that if they're interested. So just reach me at Crow and Rue. You can also reach me at Richard Crow on Facebook or Tata Mbele on Instagram, and I'm pretty active on there. So thank you, and I really appreciate everyone coming, and hopefully we'll have many more conversations, and maybe we be guided by the light.
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard. This was good. And I'm sure Richard will offer to do more with tools or other topics. And, you know, at some point we will be going back to in-person in Witch Lab. Know though that is not going to stop us from broadcasting and having remote presenters. We'll have a laptop at Witch Lab, and if you're presenting, Richard, if we're doing it live, you know, we'll just have a laptop and a projector or something to project you. We will be going back to hopefully doing rituals as well. We used to do meetings every month on the first Sunday, and then we were doing rituals on a Friday of the month. With COVID, that all sort of went out the window. But here in a couple months, we'll probably be returning to in-person. But again, everything will still be broadcast on Zoom, along with putting everything on YouTube. So none of that will stop. We'll keep involving people at a distance. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you again, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you all.